If you have less than $20,000 saved, you're not struggling. You're exactly where the system wants you to be. There's a number where hundreds of financial products just stop making sense. And once you cross it, you become a customer nobody can sell to.
I kept noticing something strange. The financial industry has thousands of products, but the more I looked into them, the more they all seemed to be built for the exact same person, someone with no cash. That made me wonder, was that just a coincidence? Or was it the business model? So I started looking at what those products actually were. Overdraft protection, credit cards, payday loans, buy now, pay later, pawn shops, rent-to-own furniture, auto title loans, cash advance apps. Even the subscription services banks sell you to protect you from your own overdrafts. Every one of them depends on the same condition. You don't have the money right now. So I asked myself the question that ended up running the whole investigation. Would any of these businesses even exist for someone with a real financial buffer? I kept coming back to that question the whole way through this. So let's run a few through it. The average overdraft fee is around $35. Banks collected billions of dollars in overdraft fees last year, not from wealthy customers, from customers whose accounts hit zero before their next paycheck landed. Would this product exist for someone with the buffer sitting behind their checking account? No. There'd be nothing left to overdraft. Payday loans carry an average interest rate between 300 and 400% annually. The entire industry exists because people need $500 before Friday and don't have it. Would it exist if they had that kind of buffer? No. That's the whole business model gone in one sentence. Minimum balance fees. Plenty of checking accounts charge you monthly if your balance drops below a set number, and the people most likely to drop below it are the ones who can least afford the fee. Would this product exist for someone with real separation from zero? No. Then I ran buy now, pay later through the same question, and I expected a clean no. I didn't get one. Would someone with the buffer ever use Affirm or Klarna? Sometimes yes. Plenty of people with real money finance purchases anyway, for cash flow reasons that have nothing to do with desperation. So BNPL isn't purely a poverty product on paper. But look at who it's actually marketed to, and who's carrying a balance on it a year later, and the pattern comes right back. It's built to remove the one moment that naturally slows spending down. Looking at the total price and thinking, I can't afford that right now. For someone without a cushion, removing that moment is the entire trap. The product doesn't create the desperation. It just quietly removes the one thing that was protecting you from it. At this point, I want to deal with the objection I had myself. Banks aren't evil. A bank is a business. Businesses are allowed to make money. That's not a scandal. But that was never really the question. The question is, which customers are the most profitable ones? Follow the incentives instead of the intentions, and the answer gets uncomfortable fast. A customer with real separation from zero almost never generates an overdraft fee, almost never carries revolving credit card debt, almost never takes a payday loan. A customer living paycheck to paycheck generates all three repeatedly for years. Nobody has to be a villain for that math to hold up. And it didn't happen by accident. Free checking used to be the default, back when banks made most of their money on interest rate spreads. When rates fell, that revenue fell with them, and overdraft fees quietly became one of the most profitable products in retail banking. Not marketed as a product, just left sitting there as a feature. Payday lending expanded hardest in the exact neighborhoods traditional banks had pulled out of. Buy now, pay later grew explosively over the last several years, partly because regulators were still deciding whether to treat it like a credit card at all, which meant, for a while, almost nobody was watching it closely. None of these are conspiracies. They're just what happens when an entire industry quietly notices which customers are worth the most. By then, I'd stopped thinking about individual products and started asking a bigger question. What does a real buffer actually look like as an actual number? I kept coming back to the same figure, around $20,000. At first, I wondered why I kept landing on that number specifically. Why not 10? Why not 50? Then I realized what I was actually solving for. I wasn't trying to become rich. I was trying to become hard to surprise. A major car repair, a new HVAC system, a medical deductible, several months of expenses if income stopped entirely. $20,000 is roughly the point where almost every normal financial emergency stops changing the direction of your life. It's not a magic number. It's just the point where a bad month stays a bad month, instead of becoming a bad 5 years. Here's the part that actually surprised me, though. The separation doesn't buy safety. It buys negotiating power. Time to leave a bad boss instead of tolerating them for another year because you need the paycheck. Room to walk away from a bad client, a bad landlord, a bad city, a bad contract, a bad business deal, without your bank account making the decision for you before you've made it yourself. Picture someone whose lease renews at a higher rate every single year. They just pay it, because what's the alternative? There's no room in the account to even ask that question. Think about the version of you with no cushion, sitting across from a bad job offer. You take it because the alternative is a very specific, very close deadline on your rent. Now think about the version of you with the buffer. Same offer, same table. But now you can say, let me think about it, and mean it. Same skills, same experience, completely different negotiating position. And the only thing that changed is what's sitting in the account behind you. The most expensive thing about staying near zero was never the $35 fee. It's the raise you didn't ask for, the job you didn't leave, the deal you didn't walk away from because you couldn't afford to. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Even the people who build the buffer usually lose it again. Most people eventually get there, 10,000, 15, 20, and then they spend it. New car, bigger apartment, a vacation they've told themselves they earned. That's not really a willpower problem. It's 4 things stacking on top of each other at exactly the wrong moment. It's lifestyle inflation. Spending rises to meet income almost automatically, so the extra room disappears before you even notice it's gone. It's reward spending. The number itself starts to feel like proof you're allowed to celebrate, so you do. It's identity. I earned this might be the single most expensive sentence in personal finance because it's usually true and completely irrelevant at the exact same time. And it's hedonic adaptation. The upgrade feels incredible for about 6 weeks, and then it's just your life again. The bar has quietly moved, and you're already eyeing the next thing that would feel like progress. That led me to another question. Why does this keep happening to people who clearly know better? We don't actually compare ourselves to millionaires. We compare ourselves to our coworkers, our neighbors, our brother-in-law, the people we see every weekend. That's why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. You're not trying to beat everyone. You're trying to avoid feeling left behind by the handful of people whose lives you can actually see. That's not a character flaw. It's just how the comparison engine in most of our heads is wired, and the financial products in this whole list are built to sit right on top of that wiring. None of that spending is wrong, exactly. It's just that nobody ever told most people what the buffer was actually for. It wasn't there to be spent. It was there to create separation. From urgency, from desperation, from every product on that first list. And it isn't really about being rich either. People confuse net worth with cash, and those are not the same thing. Someone can own $1 million house, hold $500,000 in investments, and still overdraft their checking account the exact same way as someone with almost nothing, if none of that money is actually liquid and accessible right now. Your relationship with money isn't set by your net worth. It's set by what you can get your hands on today without a penalty attached. That's the whole reason a well-invested person can still make decisions under pressure, and a person with a much smaller number in a boring savings account doesn't have to. Which raises the obvious follow-up. Should you finish saving the whole $20,000 before you invest a single dollar? No. Get a starter cushion first, a few months of real expenses, so a bad week doesn't turn into a crisis. After that, keep building the rest of the buffer and investing at the same time. Sitting entirely in cash for years loses to inflation quietly the whole time you're doing it. The order isn't all or nothing. It's just what comes first. So what does the actual order look like? Once the starter cushion exists, and why that order specifically? The emergency fund goes first because it protects your life. It's the thing standing between a bad month and a bad 5 years. After that, if you have access to one, an HSA, because it's the best tax treatment in the entire tax code and it protects your health at the same time. It quietly doubles as a second emergency fund. Then your 401k match, because that's free money. An immediate guaranteed return no other dollar in your life can compete with. Then a Roth, because it protects decades of future growth from ever being taxed again. Then taxable index funds for whatever's left, because that money buys you flexibility. Nothing locked away, nothing penalized for touching it early. And the number gets more interesting once you run the math in both directions. $20,000 sitting in a high-yield account at 4% generates about $800 a year, doing nothing but existing. Invested at a long-run average closer to 10%, that same $20,000 can roughly double every 7 years. But here's the version of that math almost nobody talks about. Say someone keeps their fund intact, gets laid off, and because they're not desperate, they can hold out for a genuinely better job instead of grabbing the first offer. If that job pays $15,000 a year more, over 10 years, that's $150,000. And none of it came from 4% interest. It came from being able to wait. We spend a lot of time calculating returns, 4%, 8%, 10%, but almost nobody calculates this one. Money doesn't just earn money. It buys the room to make a better decision. And the better decision is usually worth more than the interest. Picture two people, same week, same problem. Both have a transmission fail on them. A $4,000 repair, no warning. Person A has $20,000 saved. They pay it, they still have $16,000 left, and Monday morning looks exactly like it did the week before. Person B has $800 saved. They put it on a credit card at 24%, make the minimum payment, and now every paycheck for the next 2 years starts a little smaller than the one before it, before a single bill gets paid. Same repair. Same amount of bad luck. Two completely different futures, and the only variable that moved was the number sitting in the account before the transmission ever failed. Now run it the other way. One payday loan on $500 rolled over for a year at 350% APR can cost you more in interest alone than that entire fund earns you in the same 12 months. The math isn't close, and it isn't abstract. It's the same $20,000 pointed in opposite directions, and only one of those directions is quiet. I used to think an emergency fund was about emergencies. Now I think it's about negotiating power. It's the ability to say no, the ability to wait, the ability to leave. I thought $20,000 was the goal. It isn't. The goal is becoming the kind of person financial products don't need anymore. Because the question was never how much money you make. The question is this: who gets to make your next decision, you or your bank account?